and I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't a take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension and everything and the drama.
How dare! Look at this! How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, hello and welcome to a Shifts and Pucks trade deadline reaction. Of course, you can follow us all on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com where we are live, Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com, Shifts and Pucks where we are live, and as well on Twitch.com, Shifts and Pucks, and subscribe on the Area 51 Sports Network as it's been a week or so of the trade season. Today, not the massive names that we have seen go, like Timo Meier, Patrick Kane, Jacob Chychrun, all of those names, Matthias Ekholm, a lot of the names that went earlier this week. We didn't see that. But there were some interesting trades. There was an interesting trade that probably more than one interesting trade that didn't happen. A few names that didn't leave. The Calgary Flames were active. The Vancouver Canucks did make one small move. We'll get into all of that. I'll kind of give you my perspective of what happened with the Flames and the Canucks and sort of where I'm thinking of both of their organizations right now, as well as I think I'm going to give you who I think benefited from the trade deadline the most, and I think the team that took a bit of a step back the most. But of course, leave your comments, all of that. We'll start with the Flames. They did make a couple of moves today. They acquired Dryden Hunt from the Toronto Maple Leafs / Toronto Marlies, and of course he's bounced around a little bit this year because he was involved in a few trades. He was involved in the Dennis Malgin trade. That's where Toronto acquired him earlier this year. He has played 37 games this year, 3 goals, no assists, -10, 24 penalty minutes overall. But he is 27 years old. As mentioned, he played with the Rangers 3 games, 25 games with the Colorado Avalanche, and then 9 games with the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of his NHL. But in terms of but he did play with the Toronto Marlies, as mentioned. Brad Treliving today talked about him reporting immediately to the Wranglers. And that was one of the things that I was a little bit curious about coming from the Flames today. Was not necessarily what they would be doing in terms of adding or subtracting to their team overall, but you had the Calgary Wranglers first year in Calgary AHL team. There is an opportunity to move to move and go on a little bit of a lengthy playoff run. So I was a bit curious about that. Hunt is Hunt as I mentioned, played with the Marlies. Going to report with the Wranglers. He has this year, of course, he is 27 years old, 9 points in 15 games. So 29 shots on goal. So he's a guy that had a lot of potential coming out of the WHL. He had a 58 goal, 58 assist season, but it just hasn't quite clicked for him in the National Hockey League so far. So he's a tweener. He's not going to be a guy that I think we see a lot of in the NHL. This was a move, I think, purely to help out the Wranglers. And they gave up Raheem Zahorna, who I know a lot of people seem to like Raheem Zahorna and wanted to see a little bit more of him, but it really didn't seem like he was truly a fit with the Calgary Flames. And play with the Wranglers. He will move on to the Toronto Marlies. I assume he will be part of that Marley organization as well. And there, so that is the one trade that they made. And, you know, would lead me to believe that you're at some point here, we'll get into the other move, would lead me to believe at some point Adam Ruzicka is probably going to go down to the Wranglers. I think that's Zahorna and Ruzicka are fairly similar players, and you know Ruzicka has been in and out of the lineup for the Flames this year, whether you like that or not. That's been what that has happened with him. But there, that is what is going on there. Zahorna gone. Hunt in terms of that. Zahorna, by the way, for the Wranglers, has 10 goals, 19 assists, 29 points. Career high, AHL career high for him. So this year. But so that's that trade. But the other trade today, the bigger, and it's not a needle mover, but the Flames did acquire former Vancouver Canuck Troy Stecher along with Nick Ritchie for Nick's brother, Brett Ritchie, and Connor Mackey. Now, not with Troy coming to Calgary, he's a UFA. They've acquired all four of those UFAs that the Canucks had from that bubble year. So Tanev, Markstrom, Toffoli, Stecher, all have worn a Calgary Flame jersey. So Stecher joining the team from Arizona, played last year in the playoffs with the Los Angeles Kings, didn't do too bad overall. So this will be a nice depth piece. Michael Stone, of course, not coming back. You've got Dennis Gilbert, who I don't think it's his perfect fit to sit on the right side, but that's what he's been playing since he's been up. Stecher has 7 points this year with the Coyotes, -3. So he's going to play in that third pairing part with either Nikita Zadorov or Dennis Gilbert. I think he's just going to that's a depth piece for sure, but certainly an upgrade in terms of what the Flames have defensively. The other part of the news today with the Flames is Brad Treliving did mention in his media availability that they do not expect Oliver Kylington to be back. And that, I think, has been a huge loss overall. They've missed his mobility, his puck handling ability. They don't quite have someone that does what Oliver Kylington does. And so Troy can provide something of that. And you brought in Nick, the brother of Brett, and Nick Ritchie. He's bounced around. He has struggled with consistency. It was that was something that Brad Treliving talked about as well today. And so we'll see what he has an opportunity here to get some fourth line minutes in. 27 years old, 9 goals, 21 points for the Coyotes. He was the 10th pick overall by the Anaheim Ducks back in 2014. So both are UFAs in terms of and Connor Mackey was not yet in an opportunity in Calgary. He'll get an opportunity in Arizona. And you got Walker Duehr, who has done what Brett Ritchie has done overall. So it's done it better. So I think that improves the fourth line. I think that is a possibility that maybe you're moving at least Milan Lucic out of the fourth line. I think that's one of the things that has been a huge struggle. And you saw that last night when you're the Flames and the Leafs. The fourth line was just out there far too long, especially against Matthews and Marner. And teams have been able to take advantage of that. Maybe Nick Ritchie gives you a little bit of an upgrade in terms of speed, in terms of some quality out there. So in terms of that part of it, that's where this is. So in terms of what was expected, really sounded like Brad was looking at more long-term stuff than short-term stuff. He just said today that he wasn't going to add any assets. That wasn't the thing. There was nothing short-term coming. And they probably were looking at things long-term. He says he likes his team, but he has to be realistic, which I think is a very interesting way to look at it, which makes it for a very interesting off-season. And which I think it leads to a lot of questions. And just where I'm at this point, this is what I think the Flames ultimately needed to do. I think you see what happens down the stretch here, and then you look and see what's next, because you've got the Wranglers having an opportunity to get some playoff experience. You may have an opportunity, especially defensively, to see where Jerome Poirier is coming from, who I think has taken a step and may take another step, which leads to prime possibility of a Noah Hanifin trade in the offseason. Of course, I said on Twitter last night, you've got, I think there was a lot of people wondering about Elias Lindholm. That's a tough guy to trade, in my opinion. It's not been the greatest. He's not had the same year as he had last year. I think there's been a lot of circumstances, but he's still a guy that is tough to trade for me. That's a guy that I would love to see re-sign here if you can get a reasonably good deal for him. But if you trade him, you hope you get a lot for him. But I think just press pause. Let's see what happens these final 20 games. Had a great game from Jacob Markstrom last night. Sutter said you're going to run the ball with Jacob Markstrom down the stretch here. So there's still a lot of things to look at with the Flames in terms of the year. And, I think that just let's see where the thought is and who's running this organization. Is it Tree? Is it Sutter? Tree doesn't have a contract. He said that didn't impact anything. So there's been a lot of stuff going on overall with the Flames in terms of just feels like a lot. Of course, you had the significant changes last year with Gaudreau, Tkachuk leaving, Monahan leaving. Let's not forget that. And you brought in Kadri, you brought in Huberdeau, you brought in Weir, and it's been a while for them to get their footing. But ultimately, the question comes down of who's going to run this team. I think that ends up to be priority one. And my questions to Daryl Sutter in the end of the offseason is, why have you not put Huberdeau and Lindholm back together? Like, I know that they didn't click instantly, but I don't see a lot of chemistry with Kadri and Huberdeau. And I think that Dubé's been okay, but I think Huberdeau, it's just, Huberdeau played around, Barkov, Huberdeau. It sort of feels like the same thing. Huberdeau needs to be someone with some defense that can play with some heavy lifting. And Kadri, while he does that, Devin mentioned this on Monday, he hasn't been great defensively. And I feel like that's a switch that I would make. Put Huberdeau back with Lindholm and Toffoli. I think that line would work. And then you have Kadri, Dubé, and Pelche. I know that you want Pelche and maybe a Huberdeau to play together, but it's about win now. I think that's something you have to look at. And then hopefully you place at least Ritchie with a Lucic or a Lewis, probably a Lucic. Get Troy Stecher, and it's either Gilbert or Zadorov. To me, I don't know if that's how. I think that's a closer decision than people think. Zadorov hasn't been great in this second half of the year here. That's been another struggle. And I think legitimately overall, the Flames defense was legitimately overrated. And I think you missed Shillington, you missed Goodbranson, but everyone had this high praise of this top four. And I don't think that they have been as great and been as good as advertised, but they're playing well defensively. Brad Trillman talked about that. But that's kind of where the Flames are at this point. And, you've got 2 games against Minnesota, who they added John Klingberg, they added Oscar Sundqvist. They are preparing for a very tough series, either A against Colorado or B against Dallas, and that is going to be, we've talked about the East and all the hype going on there. That Central Division is going to be a battle too, and I think Colorado is still my odds-on favorite, but Dallas and Minnesota are not going to be far off. But we'll see. Minnesota have done some interesting things, and we'll see what happens these next 2 days with that as well. The Flames still have 2 games against Minnesota. They still have 2 games against LA. They have some winnable games. And Winnipeg's in a free fall. They play Edmonton tonight, and then tomorrow. It's going to be interesting. I think they're in their last. The hill is steep. There's no question about it. I don't expect them to make it, but I give them credit for at least trying. As far as the Vancouver Canucks go, it's been an interesting week. You got the Philip Hronek deal for a first and a second, and that's the Islanders' first pick that they got for Bo Horvat. And just my perspective on this, just as thinking about this, I really like Philip Hronek as a defenseman. I think that this is a guy that has some good potential. Kind of reminds me in the style of a Charlie McAvoy a little bit, even in a little bit of a style of a Chris Letang. Can be that type of player. I think he's definitely a top 4 defenseman. Is he a top 2 defenseman? That's really hard to say. He hasn't shown it yet. So, in terms of the defenseman, it's a good ad. But the draft picks given up in a team that is 27th overall, it's still a little difficult for me to stomach. If you could have gotten Philip Hronek, without giving a first, I think that would have been a win. But I don't think the Vancouver Canucks can go draft Schmaft. They're not in that position here. They don't have the prospects overall to be not going draft, to not focus a little bit on the draft. Even if you believe, and the plan was there, and I know that everybody's talking about the plan. Even if you believe that the plan is 2 years away, you still need to accumulate some draft capital. And it feels like the Canucks are going all in with a 5-2 offsuit in a poker hand where everybody else here either has a straight, a flush, or more chips on the board. And I loved what Devin said on Monday. The Canucks are acting like they're a year ahead of what they actually are. They still need to do some work. Now, I think they've made some crafty pickups. I think the Kraftstoff pickup was a good crafty pickup. But I think it's a good. I think for me, it's a good defenseman that they paid ultimately to. They paid the wrong price for. If you could have done it another way, I think it would have made sense. If you could have done it, maybe giving up a second, maybe 1 draft pick, but they ended up giving a first and a second. And although that is the going rate, you hear Brad Treliving talk about the prices. It's just he didn't see it make sense. That's one I don't see making sense. They did acquire a couple of other draft picks. Of course, Luke Schen's now a Leaf. They got a 3rd-round pick. Curtis Lazar is now a New Jersey Devil. All the best to Curtis. I think Curtis is a wonderful human being. Just didn't quite work out here in Vancouver. They've got a 4th-rounder for him. But it really just sounds like if Patrick Allvin talked about it today. He talked about the team making the playoffs. They think that they're a playoff team next year, and I just don't see it. So, of course, the other part of this is there was talk that JT Miller or Brock Boeser were on the table. Both didn't happen. There were some reports around Miller in Pittsburgh. Elliot Friedman said Vancouver and Pittsburgh did have something going on. So I guess we'll have to wait and see in the offseason what happens there. But nothing happened. I wasn't surprised. But there's a lot of work to do. And Patrick Alvin said that as well for the Cooks. They are not happy. There's a lot of work to do. So is Miller or Boeser on part of the team next year? I don't know. I think Miller chances are higher. I would say more than 50% that Miller remains on the team. Boeser, I don't know. I could see that going either way, to be honest with you. I could see Boeser leaving. I think this is a guy that I think a lot of people can see a change of scenery for. I think some teams are going to recognize that there's a hole in terms of what their scoring is, and they will be inquiring about Boeser next year. And so I could see that being something that people look at next year. But the Canucks, to me, as I go into just to give my perspective, I think I have to come and, I hate to be this negative, but the Canucks have to come away as one of the losers of this trade deadline, or the one of the just because I think you look at what a number of other teams did, especially the trade counterpart Detroit. They were able to maneuver their way to get a couple of a few picks. You got Tyler Bertuzzi, a UFA. You got a first-round pick in 2024. So you recognize where you are, and you build some draft capital. And I know there's some people that are not, draft schmap, but it allows you just to play a little bit more in the field, whether what that is. And you've got some players that are able to come back in here. Bergstrom, you got Jake Wallman, which allows you to replace Philip Broding. The Red Wings are in a really good situation. But the Canucks don't have the cupboard is just too bare to give up significant draft assets, especially when you've given up draft first-round picks before. So I'm going to put the Vancouver Canucks on one of the losers, one of the losers in the here. I just can't come away with what the Vancouver Canucks have come away, and I can't honestly say that they have done enough or have taken a right step. It's a good defenseman, but too much. The other one is, for me, is I don't understand what the hell is going on in Philadelphia. This team wasn't going to compete. They knew that. They've known that pretty much all year. They haven't made a significant move to add any assets going forward. If I was a Philadelphia Flyer fan, I would be just furious. Chuck Fletcher said that they didn't get any calls on James Van Riemsdyk until about 20 minutes or a couple hours before the deadline. Don't you call people and offer, there are some good pieces in Philadelphia that you can move and start building. And I know Philadelphia is sort of Vancouver light in that they are not, ownership is not into the rebuild business, but that is a team that is so stagnant, and it just seems like it's just being like, they're not drafting well, they're not trading well, they're not asset managementing well, and they're just going to be in this perpetual long-term thing. And even with Tortorella there, I can't see the Flyers being anything higher than a top 2 wildcard team at best with this. And you have an injured Sean Couturier, Travis Konecny is getting older, defense getting older. I don't understand what's going on with the Flyers. So the Flyers are the other team that I look at especially in terms of selling. I have to come away loser as a loser or a team that did not gain. My 2 winners, the first one, and I asked the question about why the Canucks are getting bashed and the Senators are getting praised. But ultimately, in my thought process, I concluded that even though they made that one significant move and they don't have the first 3 picks next year of the draft, and I do think that that's a bit concerning for me, I don't think a team wants to play the Ottawa Senators right now. If the Ottawa Senators get into the playoffs, I think that they are going to cause some damage. And, you got that Jacob Chikrin deal done. You added to a really core that just seems to be growing. With if you could play Jacob Tricker with Thomas Chabot, and you got an underrated defenseman, I think, in Artem Zub. You've got some other things going. Giroux's starting to get it together. Tim Stützle is a pain in the ass to play against. Brady Tkachuk has taken a huge step this year, and you found some found money in goal. The Ottawa Senators are the team. That team, I know that everyone in the East loaded up, but the Ottawa Senators are just right now. They are the most exciting team in Canada. Of the Canadian teams, the Ottawa Senators might be my team that excites me the most, even more than the Maple Leafs, because they got some speed, they've got some youth, they've got some brashness, and I think they're going to give the Boston Bruins. If they play the Bruins, they are going to give them a hell of a run. I think they're going to punch the Bruins in the face. I really do. I really think the Bruins are in for a fight of their life. And I know that everybody is impressed with the Bruins and they look good, but this Ottawa Senator team is just going to go in and they'll have no idea that they're the underdogs. They won't care. There is something building in Ottawa. You could just watching them, you could feel it. There's an excitement in Ottawa. So I think I have Ottawa as one of my winners. The other one is Minnesota. You get John Klingberg for not much. He is a guy that can add something. He's a pain in the ass to play against. He hasn't had a good year. This is an opportunity to him to take it. If Minnesota plays Dallas, that's some revenge tour for John Klingberg. When Colorado wins that division, that adds some ability. I don't know. They haven't addressed that center ice position so much, but maybe if you get magic in a bottle with Marc-Andre Fleury, it's a gritty team to play against. They got one of the elite left wingers in Kaprizov. You got a guy that's won a cup in Oscar Sundqvist. I really liked what Minnesota did. It wasn't massive, but they are developing. It's hard, and they play playoff type hockey. It's kind of boring, but I don't know. The Minnesota intrigues me as the team. I still think everything is going through Colorado. Still think that, but that intrigues me. That's another team that I think was a winner. Just another team that I think. I wonder if Dallas didn't do enough. I know they got Max Domi. I think they needed to do a little bit more, especially with the way Minnesota and Colorado are playing right now. Colorado didn't do a lot, but they're still scary, very talented team. I think Dallas needed to do a little bit more. I think that's a concern. And I think in the other team that I have to say that I was impressed with overall is what Nashville ultimately built some draft capital. I do love Tanner Jeannot, don't get me wrong, but you got 5 picks for Tanner Jeannot. You were able to get Reed Schaefer from Edmonton, who I think is a good acquisition, almost a replacement for what Tanner Jeannot brings. He's a guy that, when I watch him with the Thunderbirds, he's a guy that gets into the fabric of the game at the right time. It's going to be interesting to see how Barry Trotz takes this team, but they've got some draft capital. They still have a pretty good goaltender in UC Soros. They've got some aging stuff that they still have to work on, but they've got the draft capital to replace it. So the 3 teams I was most impressed with were Ottawa, and I know they made one move, Minnesota, and Nashville, just because of the way that they accumulated picks. And Detroit, I think, those were the 4 teams I've been most impressed with. They were able to accumulate a bunch of picks. Really, just for Yzerman to measure around what they had to do, and almost had to pivot in a lot of ways. So they're Vancouver, Philly, and to me, Dallas are the 3 teams that just really confuse me a little bit. not surprised that Carolina was ultimately conservative. They are a conservative sort of team. They don't make a lot of moves. And I'm not sure what the Rangers really did. They are loaded. There's a lot of offensive talent there. Maybe it's enough. We'll have to see. I think the one thing I'm concerned about is if Ryan Lindgren isn't healthy, that is a tougher matchup when they play New Jersey. But I also like what New Jersey did. I think Timo Meier was a great pickup. That's my second favorite trade. I think the Chychrun trade, just because of how Ottawa has reacted to it, is my favorite trade. Timo Meier, that's my second favorite trade. And the Leafs, they made a lot of moves. They really did. I like the Ryan O'Reilly move. I think it gives them some options. They have a number of they've got the depth. My question ultimately comes down to defense and goaltending when you're playing Tampa, and I don't know if they have matched it. If Victor Hedman has taken a step back and Morgan Rielly has taken a step up, then Game 7 between the two is different. But we'll have to see. So let us know what you think about that. That's pretty much the trade deadline in a nutshell. That's my perspective. Devin and Chris returning. Chris, good to see him back. Sean and Tyler chatted about the rest of the trades earlier in the week. I'll retweet that, and we'll be back again next week. Bring back the news packs next week. I've been busy with the work schedule, but different schedule next week, so we're looking at the news. And yeah, going to be interesting to see what happens with the Flames in terms of their playoff position and where they're at. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Canucks are developing. I mean, now we head into the draft, heading into the draft lottery, heading into the off season. See where they're at. See what we're examining. I think that, just in terms of the one other thing I will say with the Canucks, there is an improvement in terms of the structural play of the Canucks. I will say that. So I think that the Rick Tocchet hire will turn out to be a good hire. But again, I can't go with the giving up a lot of draft capital. That just concerns me. But let us know what you think. Follow us all individually on Twitter. Sean Beardy Canuck 03, Tyler TNOBLE, Devin Gordhowe 09, Chris Schneid's SCHNEIDZ. I am KEVOLE. Shifts and Pucks Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.